the end of the year balance before adjustment in the accounts receivable account should be. So we're going to have to calculate what that ending balance is supposed to be for allowance for doubtful accounts. I'm going to go ahead and set up a T account. Allowance for doubtful account. All right, so we're going to have to determine this. It says at the beginning of the year the balance in the allowance for doubtful account is a credit balance of $640. So this is my beginning balance, $640. And that's based on last year's analysis, and that's what they adjusted it to. All right. This year we're going to go ahead and take a look at some entries, and it says during the year $350 previously written off accounts were reinstated. So that's a good thing. $350 were previously reinstated. Let's look at the journal entry that was made previously in the books. So we're going to, when we wrote that off, it was written off with a debit to the allowance for doubtful account. It was written off for $350, and it was credited for accounts receivable for J. Jones, say. Well, we'll say Jones, for $350. So that was the entry when we wrote it off. Okay? We wrote it off, and we had deducted the debit from the allowance of doubtful accounts. We had credited the accounts receivable J. Jones, and the net realizable receivable didn't change, because when we did our analysis, we took the accounts receivable minus the allowance of doubtful account to come up with a net realizable amount. We knew some of them were going to go bad. We didn't know which one. We do identify Jones went bad, so we write it off. The net amount doesn't change. Now we find out that Jones is going to pay us. Jones says, look, I'm sorry I couldn't pay you before. I still am going to pay you. I'm going to be sending you a check. So we have to reverse that write-off because we're going to collect it. So our journal entry to reverse that is going to be just the opposite. We're going to debit accounts receivable Jones for $350, and we're going to credit the allowance account for $350. Now when he pays us, okay, so we're going to make our entry, and of course that's going to be a credit of $350 here. When he pays us, the entry is going to be this. I'll do that entry. We're going to receive cash of $350, and we're going to credit the accounts receivable Jones for $350. Notice that doesn't affect my allowance account. That's when I'm actually receiving the money. Okay? Now, back to the question. It then says that $410 of accounts receivable were written off during the year. We found some other people who couldn't pay us, and so the journal entry to do that was debit the allowance account. That was $410. And we credited our accounts receivable for Smith, that's the person who couldn't pay us, for $410. And so the journal entry, we would have a debit for $410. Now my balance then, I'll do it in blue, my balance in the account is going to be the $640 plus $350 minus $410. And if I add those up, it's $580, so I have a $580 credit balance in the account.